Hi, everyone. This is Matt Kinsman, Head of Content at Connectiv. Thanks again for joining us today for how to get the most out of email advertising. As niche and B2B publishers, we have more digital content vehicles and digital advertising channels at our disposal than ever before. But email advertising really remains the workhorse by offering higher engagement and higher returns than many buzzier types of digital advertising. But just how strategic are you when it comes to actually selling email advertising? Email is typically sold on a flat rate basis based on subscriber volume with no real connection to the advertiser's broader campaign. Today we're going to be talking about optimizing your email advertising and giving it the attention that it deserves. Our speakers today include Steve Werkmeister, Director of Marketing at Salem Web Network, and Jeff Kupiecki, CEO at Power Inbox, a specialist in email monetization. As a reminder, you can submit questions via the chat tab in the lower left-hand corner of your screen at any time during this presentation, and we'll also hold a Q&A at the end. With that, Jeff, take it away.
Thanks so much, Matt, and I really appreciate everyone making the time, whether it's your morning or afternoon, to spend it with us and learn a little bit more about how to get the most out of our advertising and email. I also want to give a special thank you to Steve. Steve's been a client of ours for several years now, and we really appreciate all the support. And I think you'll hear he has a fascinating story to talk about how they've been able to really transform their program by leveraging some of the themes that we're going to talk about today. Let's start with what people today think about when they think about email monetization. As Matt suggested in the introduction, a lot of people are using this, but maybe it's sometimes just seen as an afterthought. Sometimes people say that you just put it in as a simple image or link to a URL. In many cases, it's sold as a flat rate sponsorship. As many of you who sell advertising probably know, a lot of times it's just thrown in along with a larger package. And what that usually results then in is a flat rate per insertion model, which might be very simple and very easy to predict, but it doesn't necessarily take the most advantage out of all the users that you could bring to bear for that advertiser. Perhaps you spend a lot of time having to kind of singularly negotiate each ad placement, and then it becomes not necessarily worth it to make it into a larger effort. And ultimately, some people feel like, well, I'll just get some affiliate links, and that's probably good enough. Our view is that if you take a more strategic view about monetizing email and specifically selling into email as your vehicle, that you'll be able to get a much larger return, higher revenue, and a more engaged audience, which will lead to actually happier advertisers. And here are just a couple of facts that we'll go into in more detail. The first is that you can actually use CPM rates to drive incremental revenue. On your website, you don't charge a flat rate to an advertiser typically. You don't necessarily sell it at the lowest possible. You sell each impression to the person who's going to bid the highest. And our view is you should take the same approach when it comes to selling advertising inside email. The second is that just like, again, on the web, you might use machine learning to make sure that your advertisements are as personalized and relevant to that specific subscriber as possible. Why should email be any different? You don't want a kind of batch and blast where everyone gets the same content. You'd want to give them something very specific, tailored to their interest, therefore make it more likely that they'll take the action that you or the advertiser wants them to take. Ultimately, you don't want to add overhead. You want to make this simple and easy to manage. And in fact, it should reflect what you are already doing on your web properties. And then finally, you should be looking for instant ROI, with the idea being that you can have something that you can easily measure and then scale. Now, a lot of our clients talk about, well, the challenge sometimes they have is, well, isn't email dead or isn't email going away? And hopefully all of us have been tracking the news as it relates to where people are getting their traffic from, let's say specifically social media and Facebook. You know that email is actually now being seen as a preferred alternative to having somebody else control your traffic. Matt referred to this as the workhorse of your marketing channels. And in fact, we would argue it is the king of audience engagement. You can see some of the quotes here from leading publishers. But in general, here are some fun facts that you can use when people say, why are you still investing in email? Email is actually the only channel that provides a direct relationship with an end user that can't be disintermediated by Google, Apple, or Facebook. It's the only channel that can have a persistent identity of a user, no matter what device that they're using. And the third is that a user is more likely to change their physical address than their email address. So if you think about how today you use your multiple channels, if email isn't becoming a growing source for you of how you access your audience, we would recommend you think about that and increase the amount of effort that you're spending. Once you have that audience, the question is, how can you best monetize that inside email? And our view is if you personalize the content, focus on what that audience is interested in, you'll be able to get deeper engagement, not just in email, but across your other channels as well. And in fact, when you look at what makes a successful and growing email monetization ecosystem, it is this interplay between giving your users content that they're interested in, giving your advertisers therefore good audiences that they can reach, and then ultimately for you as the publisher or you as the sender, making sure the balance between those returns a high ROI and something that can be built upon in terms of audience engagement. And a lot of what hopefully you'll hear in a moment is how one brand, Salem Web, was able to successfully blend the different elements of these circles into seeing some very good results. As we talk about improving the ROI of your email efforts, we'll talk about three distinct ways that we think should work together. The obvious one that I think people might have signed up for this webinar for is for direct sold ads, right? How do I get the most of selling an ad myself? And we see that as obviously a primary driver for those who think about monetization. But we think there's two other elements that need to be balanced with your direct sold efforts. The first is, how do you promote your own content? Ultimately, the editors behind your emails want to bring those users back to your website. They want people to engage with the content. They want them to take actions where you have the bulk of your interactivity, which is on the web. So you want to have a balance between the ads that you sell and the content that you're driving them to. But what about people that don't sell out of their inventory? What happens if we have a spot and yet you weren't able to get fill on that? That's where the backfill with third-party ads comes into play. Ultimately, to balance the ROI, you want to be able to maximize the number of ads you sell directly while balancing that with promoting your own content and never leaving an impression not sold or unmonetized. And the combination, or if you will, the optimization between those three will yield the highest ROI and ultimately the most revenue for your organization. We're going to talk more about each of those specific solutions in a moment, but I'm really excited to turn over now the webinar to Steve so he can tell you a little bit about his organization and how they've been successfully leveraging these different aspects to promote content to their users and maximize the ROI from their email program. Steve, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Jeff, and thank you, Matt, for having me today. I'm really excited to explain kind of what we've done with Power Inbox and how it's been successful for us. So just so you understand who we are, we're basically a Christian, family-themed publisher. We're a division of the Salem Media Group, which owns a bunch of radio stations, 107 stations to be exact, over the country. It's mostly in the Christian, family-themed, conservative Republican space. And out of that grew the Salem Web Network division, which really focuses on all the online efforts in terms of reaching the consumer. And for us, it's the audience. So just to give you kind of perspective on what we do and how we kind of go about this, we have a lot of different channels in which we try to reach out to our audience. One being email, which has been a huge driver for us. We have 17 million email subscribers currently in various states, and this is over the course of the past, I'd say, 7-8 years. We've really grown it to that level, and we're actively engaging 3 to 4 million subscribers out of that database. In addition, we have 45 million Facebook fans that we're leveraging and kind of reaching through retargeting and doing a lot of different things to push them back to our websites. We are a publisher, so what we typically try to do is monetize in one of two ways. driving people back to our websites to see ads and make revenue that way, or through the email itself, so direct email campaigns or email newsletters. And so with that, Matt or Jeff came to me a couple years ago, and I guess it was 2016 we started talking, and we started out testing out a couple different things. One of which was this revenue stripe idea. So historically, we had newsletters that we ran, and they had display ads in the top and display ads in the bottom, just very kind of conventional advertising in our newsletters. And we were finding some value there, but we really weren't monetizing at the level we wanted to. We weren't really doing a great job of actually selling it directly. And Jeff came along through Power Inbox, or through PostUp, which is our email provider, and said, hey, why don't you try doing this thing called revenue stripe? So for us, it was kind of a new idea, and basically it's a suggested article approach. As you've probably seen on websites where you're scrolling through the content, you see this little, these kind of 3 or 4 boxes that are suggesting articles to read. So we tested that out through Jeff, and we found a lot of success with it. So then we approached him about, overall, how much, we're also having issues with just monetizing our newsletters in general, not just kind of these one-off ads, but the whole concept of the newsletter itself. So we worked with him on an approach to basically run all of our advertisements through him, but using DFP. So for you guys who might not be aware, it's double-click for publishers. And we use DFP to run all of our ads on all of our websites. So the big core advantage for us was we could now leverage advertising in one source. So the people who actually, the traffic coordinators for my team, would go in and say, okay, I know I want to run this campaign not only on websites but also in newsletters, which became a huge not only time savings but also a revenue opportunity for us too, because we now optimize based on how those ads were doing. The big thing for us that we learned quickly was we were missing out on a lot of revenue opportunity because we were almost entirely geared towards direct sales. We have a sales staff that goes out and has these one-off client relationships, and we're missing out on the idea that, hey, we don't have to actually sell all these B2B type of approaches. You can actually have this backfill of programmatic inventory that will run. And so we worked with Jeff and his team on how do we continue to actually run direct ad sales and direct placements with our newsletters, but also how do we make sure that we constantly have some sort of revenue source there, so in case we don't have that sale, how do we backfill that? And so that was kind of the genesis of this whole how do we integrating DFP with Power Inbox and really leveraging, optimizing really probably the best word to use, optimizing when those ads run so that we're consistently getting a revenue stream. And so it's been, for us, it's been a wonderful approach because, financially it's been very successful for us. The big thing for us is we cut we increased our profit margins. Partly in due because the cost that Power Inbox was running is a lot cheaper than what our other provider was. So the cost came down significantly, but we also saw great things in terms of higher fill rates, higher click rates. We were able to have more engaged and more targeted and more personalized ad placements than we ever had before. From our direct sales perspective, they had a lot more technology and features than they ever had before. And again, they could actually leverage this across not only with the newsletters but also on the websites as well. And from purely from a programming type of or trafficking type of position, it was a lot easier now because we had one source to traffic all of our ads. We also tested out things like dynamic features. One of the big things we do in kind of a seasonality thing is we try to grow our email database. So how do we engage our users? And we were able to actually engage them a lot through this campaign that Jeff and his team created where they had this kind of visual aid of this kind of spinning wheel that we'd run in our newsletters. And you could actually click on it to actually win a prize. So we had this contest that ran for 12 days in our newsletters, and it was purely an engagement contest. But over that course of 12 days, we averaged about 50,000 additionally engaged email subscribers. So for a company like us, adding 50,000 new people back into your file that you can now actively target and message was a huge, huge win. But that's one of the examples. There's been many other things we've done with Jeff and his team in the past, and for us again, it's just been a great rewarding relationship. It's a lot of synergy because the ESP we use, PostUp, actually aligns with Power Inbox really nicely. But they've been wonderful to work for.
Well, thank you, Steve. Hopefully you can see on your screen. I was trying to just share the desktop so you can see that example of the campaign that you're talking about. It was really a lot of fun to kind of. Did you see that?
Yeah.
The brainstorming that we were able to do by kind of working together on more than just, as Steve said, a typical display ad, which is where many people start, really thinking about how do we blend in the ad content, the sponsored content, as another article or as another thing that a user might be interested in, and then taking them from there into something that could be much more engaging and almost gamifying the email. And so we really have enjoyed it and obviously appreciate all the support and everything from Steve and his team.
And the other thing
what I'd like to do, go ahead, Steve.
I was going to say the other thing we've done that we've been really successful with is actually these kind of slide outs and pop-ups within our newsletters too that you guys have helped create for us. We've had some movie campaigns where we have a movie buyer come to us and say, hey, I'm trying to advertise the movie that's coming out on Thursday. Can you get some really high-level branding out there on your websites? Well, we've done that in the past, but one of the things we found was really engaging was in the actual newsletter itself. We'd have this pop-up slide out that'd say, hey, check out this great new movie starting on Thursday. That just really was ancillary to the newsletter itself. We found a lot of success with that, and we had a lot of good feedback from the production company that they got a lot of engagement from those pop-outs as well.
Great. And Steve has been gracious to kind of give us the whole hour, so after I get through discussing a little bit more content, we'll come back and folks can ask him more questions about their experience and just how they've been looking at email as a very strategic channel as they continue to kind of drive more engagement and monetization from their users. What I'd like to do now is just kind of drill in a little bit further into the product itself, hopefully give you guys some tips and things to think about as you think about your email monetization strategy. We'll start with this notion that we call ad server for email. And really the key differentiation here from just purely putting ads in your email is that you leverage your existing web server or the ad server you have on your website. As Steve mentioned, DFP is a very common one, but it could be other ad servers as well. And the whole idea is you don't want to necessarily have to replicate your sales infrastructure or your ops team or your traffic coordinators to have to manage two different sources of demand. What we've done is effectively leverage what's already existing on the web and just make email appear in real time within that source. So if you have a campaign that's supposed to hit 1 million impressions, whether those impressions appear on the web or in email, you'll be able to get an accurate reflection of that cap. And it's also great as it relates to also pricing. So if you wanted to have a premium price in email, you can set it up that way. If you wanted to sell it at the same rate that you have on the web, you can do that as well. And that allows you then to bring more supply to the demand side, and especially those folks on the phone that are probably at the higher end of the CPMs. I remember at the conference, we had discussed with some folks that they got as high as $100 to $200 CPMs for some of their campaigns, and sometimes even higher. Those are extraordinarily large numbers compared to what typical B2C companies see. And so if the opportunity is to sell more to get such a high rate, then opening up more inventory makes a lot of sense. And we even tell folks that if you're not sending to your users everyday email, you might not be sending enough. And some people who are kind of hesitant about that, we definitely can help you with some data that suggests that engagement is not based on how many emails people receive. It's kind of when they engage with them. So somebody who's going to opt out will opt out no matter what the volume is. And someone who will engage generally will click more if they see more opportunities to click. No different than reach and frequency for other types of ad programs. So the idea here is that you can actually take your existing ad server, integrate the campaigns and the tracking in one place, and then have email become a supply and reflect that automatically in real time on the same dashboards that you use today. We call that ad server for email. And just to demonstrate a couple of examples here and what that might look like, it could be a traditional banner ad. So that's just sold at the top, called a marquee. That could be a 970 by 250. It could be a 720 by 190. Really could be any size. It could be a 300 by 250, as you're seeing here, or it's very small on this side, but a native unit, something that looks more like a contextual, you may like, type ad. One of the nice things about the ad server for email is that we can reflect all standard IAB sizes that you're already selling and just reflect those inside email. Now, clients sometimes ask us, well, what about targeting? We want to make sure that there's a geo, there's a day parting, there's the ability to change rates based on other things. All those things can be honored when you pick the same targeting criteria from web and apply it to email, even though email sometimes doesn't always have all the same attributes. So it would be based on the data that would be available, but you'd be able to leverage those same targeting criteria so the right ad is shown to the right user based on whatever rules you set up. The real nice thing, though, is you don't have to then replicate that rule set inside a separate ad server. You're using the same ad server and the same tools that you're already familiar with. Now, Steve mentioned revenue stripe. Think of this as your backfill. If you have a challenge in getting 100% fill on your direct sold, then leveraging our ad network can provide you high-yielding backfill inventory. The way it works is that we can support email. We also can, frankly, support web and browser-based notifications as well. In our product, there's no fees. There's no minimum commitment. You can see on the right it's a $2 to $6 range, but frankly, some of our clients are even above $6 when it comes to the CPMs for the unit. And you have complete control over the quality of the content as well. So if there's certain categories or advertisers or types of products that you do not wish to see ads on, you can work with us and our team, and we'll make sure that those aren't shown. What makes this very exciting is that every user on our side is seen as an opportunity to bid out the ad. And so we have a real-time system that's constantly looking at what the available inventory is and then taking bids and optimizing it among the advertisers that we work with. We have about 250 direct advertisers, and then we plug into additional programmatic sources to get many, many more options to provide you with what we think is industry-leading monetization rates. Now, the other nice thing about working these two products together, ad server where you sell directly and then revenue stripe for backfill, is you'll find that if today you're selling your own inventory generally in a static way, by moving everything into an automated system, you will be able to find the pockets where your direct campaigns can get higher fill and or get better yield. And again, just learning from the experience we had with Steve, one of the things that we saw was that based on getting a faster reply to when a piece of inventory was available and the ability to bring the ad, we were able to kind of increase the number of ads they were selling directly. And we were optimizing for the right audience as well. We found over time that Salem was selling more of their advertising to a local U.S.-based population and less of their direct advertising to non-U.S. And that actually resulted in overall higher yield because the audience that was more relevant to their advertisers, they were willing to pay more for it. So they were getting kind of higher fill at a higher rate overall than what they had before. And again, here, just to give some examples, what works with the backfill is the same as when you do the direct sold. You could have 300 by 250s, you could have large units, and you can have native units, all of which can work the same way as the way that your direct sold is sold today. In fact, you can even use the revenue stripe without a direct sold. In other words, you can just have this as a way to monetize and create some additional income. When you go down that path, there's a lot of flexibility for the size and placement of each of your creative inside the newsletter. And we can basically personalize that to any size that you'd like, with any background, any font, etc. And we're finding that many of the large publishers, folks like Hearst or Time or the Food Network, are really seeing kind of great results from this because it augments what they're already doing in their direct sold side. But many of our clients find that the direct sold makes up maybe 20 or 25% of the number of impressions they have. And so the nice thing, again, about using a backfill is you'll get 100% fill guaranteed because we always have advertisers interested. In fact, our model is one that's based on performance, The advertisers pay us on a click basis, very similar to how they would work with Facebook or with Google, and that allows us to always have an ad to show. So you'll never be in a situation if you're asking us to do the backfill where we might not have an ad to show. No matter what the segment, no matter what the geography, no matter what the time is, we'll always have something to show, which again can boost up the yield of what you see. And again, just to give you some more perspective on that, that would work cross-device. And one of the nice things when it comes to email is that we can identify the same user who could be opening up your newsletter on a computer during the day, maybe a mobile device in the afternoon, and a tablet in the evening. We'd be able to link all those into the same profile and therefore be able to target better that user with advertisement and content that is most relevant and most likely to get them to click. And you can see from another example here from the KeepSafe team about how many different subscribers they have. And we encourage very much folks that have not tried to aggressively grow their list to think about doing that. Now, a little bit on the technology, kind of how does this work? So if you were optimizing content on a website, you'd have the full ability to change a piece of content for every user because obviously the page gets loaded that way. One of the constraints in email is that for the most part, people have seen it as a static environment. Whenever it's sent, it's fixed. What our technology has done is we've been able to kind of break that mindset, and now we change the content at the time of the open. That allows us to learn a couple of things. We know the context of the user. We'll know where they are, what geography that they're in terms of when they open the email. We know what device they're on desktop or mobile. We also know what's transpired since the email was put together. So if you're seeing a trending either on your own content or when we see it on the advertisement, we can then optimize so that the next user who opens will get the most likely or most popular piece of content that they'll be most likely to click on. And so that's how we are able to drive engagement, because we find the pockets of traffic and interest that are most likely to result in a click from your users. Now, we've talked about direct sold. That's you selling your own ads and using an ad server. We've talked about the backfill for that we call revenue stripe. And the third area that I want to talk about that Steve had touched on is what we call dynamic mail. And really the goal behind this is to help you drive more traffic to your own site. This is a product that we've been building for folks that don't necessarily just do ads. They're folks that are primarily e-commerce or are trying to make a sale or drive traffic back to their site. And what we do is help them with the same real-time technology, but with some additional use cases to help drive more interest, engagement, and ultimately click-through. Examples of this would be video that plays inside the email, or a carousel of images or content that moves across the screen. Or it could even be a form where a user can enter in data and that allows them to kind of collect more information and progressively profile that user. All of these can be combined with the real-time aspect, so we know where the user is, we know what time it is, and that can change the content that they see when they open up the email. And here are just a couple of examples of those. Steve had mentioned a pop-up or a pop-over. That's the example here in the bottom right. We've got some examples from Hearst and from even some NFL teams. And the NFL themselves have been using this on a regular basis. And what we're finding is that folks that like to drive not just pure advertising dollars, but also then traffic back to their site where they can monetize, you like to have that blend between a monetization event that occurs in the email versus an event that might occur on your site. And we believe that you should never have to make a trade-off between those two things, that you want to optimize revenue overall. So sometimes that user is best off seeing an ad and going to an advertiser, but other times that user would be best off coming back to your site because we can predict that they're more likely to actually engage with your own content. Having a product like Dynamic Mail allows you to enhance your own content so you get those organic clicks back to your site, and it can help you optimize overall versus purely focusing on the ad click that you get inside the email. Now, those are just three of the products, and hopefully they fit within this broader discussion about how you can improve the monetization of email and increase the ROI. I thought it would be useful to talk a little bit about what we're seeing overall in the industry, and this is frankly some thoughts that we've been pulling together with the idea of potentially getting more feedback from folks in the industry about if they see this convergence. Because we work with a lot of retailers and we've worked with publishers, we're seeing that the traditional line between ad tech, which was primarily around advertising to prospects or to new customers, versus tools in the MarTech, which could be thought of as the team that's responsible for retaining and upselling existing customers, is starting to blur and even break down. In fact, now we're seeing at some places that the departments are starting to finally share information. They're not being siloed into a team that's solely responsible for audience expansion and acquisition versus retention and upsell. What we're also seeing is that where there might be some very strong data points on the ad tech side, there's been a greater interest from the MarTech side to get that data and leverage it in decisions that are being made. Many times I talk to clients and they tell me that what they've learned about prospects or what they know about them is not at all being factored into by the teams that are doing the upsell. And yet the opportunity to take that information, it makes a lot of sense to be able to use that on the MarTech side. And we think the reverse is true as well. On MarTech, it's very common to think about a segment of one. You have one product offering or one recommendation per user, whereas when it comes to prospecting, people generally are comfortable with saying, well, I'll just show this one ad or this one offer. And our view is that the same way that MarTech has thought about using data to get very specific recommendations, the same is going to happen on the ad tech side. And finally, if attribution is becoming increasingly important, and obviously it is, in terms of being able to separate where did the user come from, where did the user most engage with your content, the more that you understand that, the more we think that, again, these worlds will combine, because it's the understanding of how the user has gone through your funnel that ultimately leads them into a successful ongoing relationship. And so the same tools that are used typically to find out was an ad successful will be used ultimately to find out is a customer being successful across the life cycle of using your product or your content. So with this convergence, we thought it would be interesting to say, well, what's ultimately going to drive that? And obviously you can hear that we're very bullish and believe that the source of all that information will be starting from the key of having email at the center. And the reason for that is, as you can imagine, email is a rich source for information about a particular individual. I like to use the example that in the old world, especially the advertising world that uses cookie, even cookie matching, we're ultimately matching to a PC or to a home computer, which might have two different users with two different objectives. When I'm on ESPN and I see lots of ads for home furnishings, I know that my wife has been browsing for potentially other products, and now I'm seeing those retargeting ads. I'm likely not going to be buying those things that are being offered to me, but now I'm aware of them. Our view is that you really want to be marketing to the individual, not to the cookie, and the best way to do that is through the email address. The other benefit of the email address, besides it being a persistent identity, is it allows you to collect many other pieces of information. So as you know from packaging up your audiences for the benefit of advertisers, there's not just the data that you have, but once you have a hash, or what's called an MD5 of an email address, you can collect much more information about that particular individual. Maybe their credit history, maybe their click behavior, maybe their age or their gender or their education or income level. And all those can be used then when you sell advertising to make that advertising more targeted. Even if you're monetizing purely on the web with very little input from email, the email list can still be a driver for targeting, because by linking an email address to a cookie or to a mobile device ID, you'll be able to get the most perspective, if you will, kind of the deepest understanding of that user, and therefore be able to optimize the best across all these different channels. So we're very bullish on looking at it that way, and we hope that you take that same approach as you think about leveraging your newsletter efforts in terms of selling ads, but also thinking about the profiles that you're building with email at the center. So now let me sum up what we've covered, and we'll leave some room now for some questions. when you think about email monetization, hopefully this is becoming more strategic for you. If I can't emphasize enough, if you're not sending to your users every day, you might not be sending enough. You need something that's easy to implement and easy to scale, but wouldn't it be better to be selling ads on a pure CPM basis that would vary per user as opposed to a flat rate? It would be great to sell something that also has a measurable ROI associated with it. And if you're already used to selling things on a CPM with a measurable ROI on the web, why not replicate that same experience inside email as well? And so that first takeaway is around leveraging what you're already doing on the web directly inside email. The second is about how do you boost your subscriber engagement by making sure the content itself is personalized and relevant. And many of our clients have told us that while their content seems to be very similar, they've enjoyed the fact that our ads seem to be very different, and they change a lot depending on who's opening up the email. That same technology that's used for advertising, as we've shown, can also be used for your own content. So we highly encourage you to think about the entire email being an opportunity to personalize what your user reads. If you have 30 articles, maybe it's best to show the 10 that are most relevant to that user, and therefore they'll be more likely to click on, than just showing all the users all 30. The third bullet is around taking advantage of the convergence that we're seeing between ad tech and MarTech, and really thinking about how do you attribute what you're already contributing from the email side. And that is leveraging the skill set and data from ad tech, and at the same time understanding that personalization that MarTech might bring, and finding ways in your organization to share the data behind what the prospecting team is looking for versus what the retention team is leveraging. And finally, if you remember nothing else, email is the center of it all. It's the identity of your audience that you can build upon. Again, we encourage you to think about that unique key that allows you to understand people's interests, their tastes, their preferences, and therefore would be more likely for them to engage with your advertisers. With that, I'd like to now turn it open to some questions. I'm going to just check our tool here and see if I can read off any that might have come.
Folks, as we mentioned, we are going to open it up for Q&A at this point. You can submit questions via the Q&A tab in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. Type your message in. You can broadcast this to all recipients or to our speakers, and we can answer it from there. Jeff, while we're waiting for questions to come in, I want to circle back to something that you had mentioned at the beginning of the conversation when you were talking about the actual sale to an advertiser for email advertising, and they're asking, why should we commit to email advertising? There's so many other things out there right now. Can you talk a little bit about how publishers can really take control of that conversation, and what should they really be emphasizing with that sale beyond just reach, open rates, and the typical metrics that have really been associated with this?
Sure. We always tell folks, let's focus on relevancy, right? It's not enough to say, I'm going to bring you 1 million users. They really need the one that's going to buy their product. So how do you make sure when you're selling your audience that you've made that as relevant for the advertiser as possible? And so some of the ways that we think about that is that email, again, provides this unique place where you can learn more about that audience. You know where they're opening. You know what time they're opening. You know what kind of devices they're on. All those are objective data points that can be used in a sales kit to help your advertisers recognize the benefit. Here's a simple little model that we use, but I think it's very powerful for folks. I'll tell an advertiser, what's the 2 most used applications on the internet? And you'd probably want to be making sure that you're advertising in those. And if people typically say something like Facebook and Twitter, we correct them. We say, no, that's not true when you look at time spent or frequency of access. It's actually Apple Mail for those who are using the Apple Mail client, or Gmail if you're on an Android and you're using a Gmail client. Those are the 2 most used applications on the internet. And then you ask your advertiser, well, are you advertising in those mediums today? And most likely they'll say no, because they're very hard to access. In fact, almost impossible if you go through those 2 organizations. One of the unique things that you can provide as somebody who sends an email is that you're effectively giving advertisers access to the end users that are most likely to be logging in every day, sometimes 17 or 20 times a day, and giving them an opportunity to see the advertiser's message. So we would suggest focusing on understanding the audience in terms of being able to really understand what you bring them, and then leveraging the uniqueness that email provides that's a match for where people are spending their time, but potentially doesn't have as much competition either with where that advertiser already might be running campaigns.
All right, great. Jeff, you gave us some nice examples of different types of email advertising elements that publishers can start using, more rich media elements, more interactive elements. Can you talk a little bit about what the response has been to those types of elements, and do they seem to really strike a chord within certain types of verticals, or is this performing across the board?
No, it's a great question. And one of the ways that we help our publishers understand that trend is a pixel that we can add to your email that can measure the time spent by an end user. Again, very similar metric that you would see on the web, hard to do on email. And what we do is we help folks realize how much time are people spending in the email. So you'd be surprised. The stats suggest that for an average publisher, 1/3 of the users will delete an email in the first 2 seconds. And you guys probably know from your own behavior, as you scroll through your email list, if you're opening it up, let's say on a mobile device, it will appear as an open, but less than 2 seconds, you probably haven't even engaged with the content. So one of the things these rich media features like video or a carousel or a pop-up, what they do is they kind of capture the user's attention. Sometimes it's wow, I've not seen this before. And we see a longer time spent in the email. And then obviously once you have the user's attention, they're going to be more likely then to read your content. And if the content is relevant and targeted, then you've been able to capture a user that might have deleted otherwise. So we do see the ability to see a benefit from using the rich media in terms of time spent in the email, and ultimately in terms of higher click-through as well.
Very good. Just a reminder to our audience, we're going to be wrapping up in a couple minutes, so if you have questions, please submit them via the Q&A tab in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. Go ahead and type in your question, and we can answer it from there. Jeff, can you talk a little? Go ahead.
Go ahead, Matt.
No, please go ahead.
I was going to say this comes up a lot. People ask about fees and pricing and things like that. And Steve had mentioned that we try and be very cost competitive. Out of all the products that we discussed, only the ad server has an ad serving fee. It's generally very competitive. The backfill does not require any commitment. The backfill doesn't require any minimums. And if you combine our backfill with the ad server, you can actually be in a situation where your yield more than covers any cost for the serving. And we actually set it up that way so that the backfill only kicks in after you've kind of effectively paid for that small amount of ad serving cost. So if you are thinking this might be costly or it's a lot of effort, we would suggest, again, you look at that without minimums and with a low kind of ad serving fee. This could be very attainable for people no matter what your volumes are. If I can throw one to Steve, I know this is unique to their platform, but how complex is this if you run more than one newsletter? And maybe, Steve, you can talk about, I think, the order of magnitude that you guys are running in terms of the number of different vehicles that you're accessing your audience with. I think that's an interesting point to share with the group.
Yeah, sure. We're kind of an interesting test case because we're a publisher who owns 20 major websites, of which I'd say like 12 to 15 we're actively promoting our newsletters. And looking at holistically all those websites together, we're talking, I think we did about 2,500 different combinations of newsletters last month. So when Jeff and his folks came to me, honestly my first reaction was, wow, I don't know if I can afford to transition over to this stuff. I mean, I have these 2,500 different newsletters I'm trying to support, and moving ad servers seems like a very daunting task. But it was a lot easier than I thought. The folks over there, your team, Jeff, did a great job of transitioning those over. They came with this kind of game plan of how do we take chunks at a time, how do we establish the newsletters, how do we find some similarities so we can move things over in kind of a sequential pattern that makes sense. And it was, it was really a fairly easy process to do that. And one of the other complexities we have is we sell not only direct, but we sell two different direct products. We have a direct impression-based product, which we refer to CPM. So in essence, someone could say, I want to buy X amount of impressions, that you're serving through your newsletter ads. Or you can buy on a cost per lead basis. So they just say, I just want to purchase, X amount of leads at a guaranteed dollar amount. And so we've worked out a way in which we can run both those programs while also backfilling with programmatic so that we're consistently getting a revenue stream. As you kind of mentioned, there's never going to be unfilled impressions. And so we created this hierarchy of order through, some folks that you guys have on staff there, where we actually kick over from our direct sold stuff to programmatic at certain levels. And it's been, I was pessimistic at first, but it's worked incredibly well. And I will reiterate, too, that if you guys are not doing anything in terms of monetizing your emails, you probably should seriously consider it because, simply even just running programmatic backfill ads on your newsletters is a complete profit center for you. So that's my feedback on that.
Thanks, Steve. I will point out most of our publishers have generally the typical 10, 20, 30 newsletters. The fact that Salem has been able to really fine-tune their audience to have 2,500, I think goes to the sophistication of their program. And hopefully it also supports the point we were saying earlier, which is once you get to that level of complexity, you need an automated system to obviously serve ads across that. And it allows you to do a lot more personalization then because you're looking at every impression now across newsletters, not on a one-off direct sold, but really as a programmatic approach. So we've been, again, very fortunate to have that opportunity, and I think it's worked out well for them. All right. Matt, should we do our wrap-up? Matt, should I do the wrap-up?
I don't hear him, Jeff, so I guess I'd say go ahead.
Okay. All right. So just want to thank everybody again for spending the time with us to learn more about how you can maximize ROI from email monetization. Steve has been a really strong supporter, and we really appreciate all the effort. We've not added a contact number for him. I'll let him decide to make himself available on LinkedIn or not for folks. But we'd love to hear from everybody. You can reach me at jeff@powerinbox.com. Obviously, you can reach our team at sales@powerinbox.com or our website at powerinbox.com. We would love to get a chance to get to know anybody who's on the call. You can reach out to us directly right after the call, and we look forward to seeing how we can help you maximize the ROI from the monetization of your email program.
Yeah, just to reiterate, Jeff, I'm happy to, if you want to look me up on LinkedIn, I'm happy to connect with you and give you some more feedback too.
Jeff and Steve, thanks very much. This concludes the webinar. We'll be following up with an archive, a recording of the presentation, as well as a deck of the presentation for all registrants. Thanks for joining us today.